Jenny Beavan is a three-time Oscar winner who is receiving this year's Career Achievement Award at the 27th Annual Costume Designers Guild Awards in February. Jenny, just to start, what does that feel like to get such a huge honor this year?
Um, Fantastic because it's from the guild, so it's my costume design peers, so it's extremely special. At the same time, I wouldn't want anyone to think I've achieved everything I need to achieve in my career. Um, I'm not finished yet, so hopefully it doesn't mean, the end of my work.
Well, your career is certainly worthy of it, and we're going to get into that a little bit later, but I do want to start by talking about a current Oscar contender, Furiosa. This film expanded the Mad Max universe, and of course, you worked on Fury Road, won an Oscar for that. What excited you the most about returning to this world?
Well, it's well, Fury Road was totally out of my comfort zone. If you think of the work I've done in the past before Fury Road, so it was actually great to come back and take it further, knowing a little bit, about the universe I was walking into and George's whole concept of the apocalypse and the wasteland and the people who inhabit it. So it was amazing. Plus, I think working in Australia was great in that we had such a talented crew. Not that we didn't in Namibia, and it was a much simpler film, but they weren't experienced filmmakers there. They were clever craftspeople, our local crew. But in Australia, it was extremely exciting.
What are those initial conversations like with George Miller, and how has that relationship evolved for you?
Well, they're actually very simple. I was in Prague, I think, when we got a call from Doug Mitchell saying we need to get something in the can by June. I mean, I didn't even know they were making it, We got to get something in the can to hold a tax break for New South Wales. And I thought, oh, okay, fine. And then I had a Zoom with George, I remember, in my apartment in Prague. And he was his usual sort of George's self, as if I knew exactly what was going on. And so luckily I knew obviously a bit about what was the Furiosa story because he talked about it over the years. But I think it was he sort of thinks, I think, in a way that you simply are going to know what to do. Um, and of course, in this case, not only did we not have a cast, we didn't really know what we were up to, and he wanted the principals in the war rig. So I mean, you'd actually see them for the whole. They were going to do the mortifier or flyer stunt sequence to get in the can because it was a set sort of, thing they could actually activate fairly quickly. No, it's a. I absolutely love George, but he's in one way very clear, and in one way very elusive. And somewhere in the middle, you find a way. But he's such a lovely man. You just want to make it work for him.
Well, and there's no shopping malls in Wasteland. So, I mean,
Correct.
the,
Yes.
the clothing reflects that. How do you come up with these interesting materials we see used here? Like we see parachutes, teddy bears. I mean, anything to make it work. Where does your mind go? And then how do you begin to start crafting that?
Well, some of it's in the script, and some of it is George's wishes, because he's very clear. He is what I call an auteur. He generates the project, he writes it, he casts it, he directs it. It's very much his film. So often he has quite strong and clear ideas about where he thinks it could go. And then we normally try and follow that and see if it works. And he came up with a parachute. I think the teddy bear is a sort of symbol of, in a way, people who've been abused and hang on to something. And we had no idea who Dementis was. If you read the script, you have no idea who he is, where he's come from, what his background is. So we used to have these Zooms. Um, we were in England or Prague and then with Australia, and we had sort of meetings about who is this character. And that was actually fascinating. And I think all sorts came up of his background and possibly military, um, possibly and well, Chris Hemsworth's own parents are child therapists, and I think he's very interested in the whole issue of what happens to children. And I think that helped come up with the teddy bear idea. But where it truly came from, I've no idea. But it kind of made sense. And so I think when you see it, you kind of understand because actually, if you look online, there's quite a lot of images of grown men with teddy bears. Now, whether they're set up photos, I have no idea, but it's not entirely uncommon. So I think people do, hold on to soft toys.
They hold on to a piece of their past, if
Yeah,
nothing else. You
exactly.
know, everything serves a purpose to help these
Yeah.
people survive. How do you balance that with the narrative, practicality, aesthetic? What is the trick to balancing all of those things to tell this story?
Well, having done it once, I think we had the idea of how it would work. Um, and I think that's what's great about them is that it everything does have a purpose. So the costumes I think are very interesting visually because there's nothing that isn't possible or true. We know where the stuff's come from, and I think that sort of helps. I mean, I'm very instinctive and I see things. So when I read a script, I just get images in my head. And obviously, I've done a lot of research. I mean, there's tons of research we all did because we all got locked down variously and everybody was tapping away. I mean, no one had anything to do. So we were all tapping away on our computers, sending images backwards and forwards around the world of gangs and different types of gangs and armor and medieval stuff and modern stuff and just extraordinary images. And I think that all helps. And I often collage because I'm not very good at drawing, so I sort of collage. And I've got these two amazing artists, Tom Botwood and Elena Pavinato, who did some drawings and some ideas. I never want a full drawing like a costume drawing. I love that sort of ideas thing, and then we can backwards and forwards bounce off each other. I find that very, very helpful. But I think that all, and then it sort of comes together with the makers. And obviously, we do lots of fittings. We try it all out on stunt people, on, each other, anyone, just to see. And we have a sort of a mock up. It was just a simple wooden, like a frame that we could use either as a motorbike or a horse. So when you got your costume on, you could actually pretend you were riding and see, made sure the trousers were, had enough space in them, and whether you needed padding and whether for stunt people, did they need to put extra padding anywhere? Were they wide enough to take knee pads and, all the real practicalities we work out with normally a stunt person. I mean, I'm sure the people around me think things through much more logically and cleverly in terms of what'll work. And I I really appreciate all the crew around me who are so clever at all that, and the makers who totally understand, particularly stunts, because they've done a lot of that in Australia. And we have a very, very supportive stunt crew and a very experienced. So it's all just working together really to make sure it does work. And then the look of it is just we keep making it, putting it on stands, putting it on people, seeing if it works. And does George like it? It's all trying on, experimenting.
What is it like to work on a film with so much CGI and visual effects? I mean, are you concerned at all what they're going to do to the movie after you've done your
I
part?
have to say, I was, yes. And dear George. So George normally, he's a great last minute ideas person. And 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening, famously, my phone would go, and it would say George Miller. And I think, oh no, what's he come up with now? And he would have come up with something. And it was always for first shot on Monday. And it was like, okay, George, we'll absolutely see what we can do. So I then ring round the crew. Everybody was up for it because everybody loves George. Um, but after we've done it and we've got it up there for him, whatever it is, I say, oh, George, I'm so, if only we'd had a bit longer, it would look better. Don't worry, Jenny, we can fix it in post. And I think, oh Lord, But what was extraordinary with Furiosa was we didn't have a cast and crew in England because there were like five of us from England on the film, maybe six. But we did have a premiere. But normally you do see it before you go to the premiere. And it was quite a glitzy premiere here in London. And it was the first time I'd seen the film, and it was absolutely no idea what we were going to see. And it was 2 years since we'd made it, or something like that. And it was like, I can remember sitting next to Lauren Rahani, and after about 5 minutes, we clutched each other and said, oh, it's all right. It does look good. And actually, I thought the CGI was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, there wasn't a grain of sand in Sydney. or Broken Hill. It's all red earth and total, exactly what you expect Australia, particularly around Broken Hill. It's those wonderful sort of grey, beautiful eucalyptusy trees and red earth, and of course lots of greenery because it had rained such a lot. Not a grain of sand. And I mean, the whole thing is sandy, like it was in Namibia, which was real sand. Amazing, I thought.
And going back, to the beginning of your career, you grew up in London.
Yeah.
What were those early inspirations that piqued your interest in costume design?
Not a lot, I'll be honest. I had no thought of doing costume. I loved theatre from the age of 10. I was absolutely captivated by theatre. And I mean, I used to see everything I could. It was extremely cheap, 2 shillings. I don't know what that is in American, probably 10p in current English. To stand in the gods at the Old Vic or go to the gods in the Royal Shakespeare Company. And it was two and threepence on the Waterloo train to get to the Old Vic from my house, so Barnes to Waterloo return. So for four and threepence, I could go and see Laurence Olivier, Joan Plowright, Judi Dench, Peggy Ashcroft, all the greats of John Gielgud in theatre. And that's all I wanted to do. And I didn't really notice the costumes as it was the sets I loved. And I went to Central School of Art and was taught by an amazing set designer, Ralph Coltai, who was a legend in the 60s and 70s, a sort of sculptor type. And I just wanted to make sets, and it never occurred to me. Um, I mean, clothing, we had very little in the 50s. We had simple clothes, 3 pairs of shoes, your indoor shoes, your outdoor shoes, and if you were really lucky, your party shoes. But it wasn't a big thing, clothing at all. And it really was much, much later when I worked with Merchant Ivory and they assumed I was a costume designer um, because I went out with Dame Peggy Ashcroft to India and I helped her get some clothes together. And the only reason I went out was she didn't want to go to India on her own and changed her first class ticket into 2 economies so I could go with her and be her companion. And they thought I was a costume designer. So I did anything going on this film and became part of that family as a costume designer. Okay, fine.
So
And
that was your first experience on a film set?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that was Hullabaloo
What did
was
that teach
Bonnie
you
and
then?
George's pictures. Sorry.
Then, so what did that teach you, being on a film set for the first time?
Um, well, I guess the way that you shoot other because I did theatre, opera, and ballet, quite a lot of it before I did this film or worked on this film. And obviously, with all those, you're working to a first night and a complete thing. This is done in pieces. You shoot a little bit, you shoot a little bit, you shoot a little bit, not necessarily in sequence. So that was a real eye opener. That it was a completely different process. I mean, this was a very low budget, made for television, very interesting little film. Um, and I mean, it was absolutely fascinating. I learned an amazing amount, and they decided I was going to be part of the family. So the next film I did with them was The Europeans as Lee Remick's dresser and Judy Moorcroft's assistant. She was the costume designer. That I really learned on. Um, and working with John Bright at Cosprop, who provided all the clothes, was an absolute eye-opener. And he's became a huge friend and also taught me pretty much everything I know about period costume. We were very well taught costume, history of costume and cutting, and very interesting at Central School by a wonderful woman called Margaret Woodward. But it wasn't the big thing. It was all about set design, really, at Central. And I think the whole experience of Hullabaloo, well, actually, I mean, I didn't just do costume, I did crowd collecting. I acted in it because the actress who was supposed to come up from Bombay couldn't do it. Oh, I think she got ill or something. They were stuck without someone of Caucasian origin, in Jodhpur, Rajasthan. I did props. I did looked after Dame Peggy in every aspect, and yeah, I was just general dog's body helper and willing to do anything. So I was part of the family immediately. And free. I mean, they paid for, well, she'd paid for me to get there, and obviously they fed me, but basically I was free. This was a great aspect of it, yeah.
And talk about your first major feature then, The Bostonians, with director James Ivory. How did you land that gig?
Well, I was by this time part of the family. Judy was supposed to do it. I was going to be her assistant. We'd actually done a couple of fittings. When she was offered passage to India, David Lean, and decided to do it. And basically, they were left without a designer. And Ismail just turned to me and he just said, Jenny, you will do it. And Jim was willing to take the risk. And I said to him, even not that long ago, because he was in England, I said, Jim, you took such a risk on me. He said, well, you've done some really good work. And I thought, but Jim, for you, I'd only literally been an assistant. And he said, no, no, I mean, I knew you were good. I thought, I made the trust. But then when we looked around, he trusted like Helena Bonham Carter. He took a complete gamble on her. Emma, Tit Thompson. I mean, a load of us who are now really well known weren't known at all. He just had an instinct that we would be okay. And then, of course, John Bright was so phenomenal from Cosprop. And so I just felt we'd done it together. And I remember saying to him on doing a huge party scene in Newport, Rhode Island, and it did look great. I mean, it's got to look great. 1870s party scene, it'd be very hard to get it wrong, particularly with Cosprop clothes. And I said, I think we did this together. I think we should have a co-credit. And he was really pleased. And we became a partnership. And it was brilliant.
And then you get an Oscar nomination.
Oh, yeah.
Was that surprising to you? Like first big film Oscar?
I guess it was. It's so long ago now. I truly can't remember my feelings because the whole awards thing, although it's very, very nice to get them. Okay, I'm not being stupid. I mean, it is pretty great. It's kind of not the first thought in my head is, am I going to get a nomination for this? So I felt um I think I was absolutely thrilled, to be honest. I think I was absolutely thrilled. And John was, and but they I think they paid half a standby flight or something. And I remember we went out all sort of economy, and I think we all stayed in Judy's room. She was being properly looked after because she was nominated for passage, I think. I mean, we all piled in like a dormitory. I mean, I had no money in those days, and it was just bizarre. Anyway, it was all fine, but it was an extraordinary thing to do, and we've been seeing a lot of the Merchant Ivory films again recently on big screens because they've been. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Merchant Ivory by Stephen Soucy.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, there you are, you see, and I got obviously quite involved with that, but it's been wonderful seeing these films again on a big screen, and I'm so proud. To be honest, I can't tell you how proud I am of being a part of that family and look and the films Jim made. I think they just get better and better. Oh, I just love them.
And then it was A Room with a View next,
Yeah,
which was an international success.
yeah,
And what do you remember about that experience in working with James again? Did it just keep getting better and better?
yeah. I mean, working with him is extraordinary, and I think he says it in the documentary that he really loves letting the people who he chooses to be creative, lets them just be creative. And I think the only thing he ever didn't like in everything I've ever done for him was I put Robert Powell in a fur coat in Jane Austen in Manhattan because he was head of an alternative theatre company, and I just knew someone who was, who sort of old fur coat, and he really didn't like it, so we swapped it over for a sort of more military navy blue, ex-army vintage kind of coat. But in all the films I've done for Jim, that's the only thing. But he just appreciated what we did, and he said that in. I'm sure he does say it in the documentary. He certainly said it in a podcast thing he did recently on Radio 4 here in England, which is lovely. It's called This Culture Alive. And he was asked about the people he worked with and the way he works. And it wasn't he didn't care. He absolutely loved it. And if he saw things that weren't right, my goodness, his eye for detail was extraordinary. But if he liked it, he was just happy that you were giving him. And so you gave him your absolute best because you wanted to. I mean, I always do anyhow, but I really wanted for Jim always to do whatever. I find him completely inspirational still.
And then for this one, you won your first Oscar. So
Yep.
that had to be more thrilling than the nomination. So do you remember that moment?
I do because we'd been so we were there a couple of days before and there's lunches and things and people were saying, I think you're gonna go home with your suitcase a little heavier or you got it. And it was like if we had, I think we'd be quite surprised. Um so it wasn't unexpected. And I had my now ex, not husband, but partner there, and he insisted we did speeches and he had us practice. And we weren't supposed to have both of us talking, so of course we did, and we did a seamless takeover, handover of one, um, thanking and then the other. And so we practiced this speech, which I think lots of people do, because you do actually have to be prepared. And it was really fun. We got these ridiculously wonderful gold statuary thingies.
Is that awkward when people are telling you you're going to win? Has there ever been a film where people were telling you you're going to win and then you don't win? Is that does that make it
Um,
difficult?
I think there were a couple where people thought I might, yes. But you know what? It's very nice being nominated. I think that's the real accolade. And I thought the last time I was, which was Mrs. Harris, I looked at the five of us and I thought any one of us could win this because we're all so different and what we're offering is so different in the films. And actually Ruthie won it, and she's absolutely wonderful, but it could have been any of us because how on earth doesn't matter at that point. Well, I'm sort of I've got some, so it doesn't. I'm not so desperate, if you know what I mean.
Well,
Because
let's,
you're one of the people who does a sort of thing, aren't you, about how
oh,
what
we're all
you
about
call
award. We love to dig into the awards
yeah.
statistic, and that's what's so fascinating is you won for Room with a View, and then it was like for over 20 years you had all these nominations and all these
Mm.
incredible movies, but then it took that long to win again
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Fury Road.
Very road, yeah. But that was quite fun because the three I've got are so different. I just think that's great.
Do you keep costumes at all? Like, are you
Oh
able to?
God, no. Absolutely not. No, no, no. Obviously I work such a lot with Cosprop. They have a lot of stuff, and John has a museum section and an exhibition section, so that's still quite a lot. Although a lot of mine went in an auction the other day to raise money for his children's foundation for the arts, and I was very thrilled with the money mine got for him. Um, so some have gone now, but no, I don't want anything. All I want from a film is the DVD.
That's fascinating.
I absolutely don't want anything. I've made it, I've done it, I've moved on. In my
How
home,
often do you rewatch your films? Do you
not
love
often,
uh,
unless it's I mean, as I said recently, I've been seeing the Merchant Ivories because we've done quite a lot of Q&As and stuff with Jim and separately about Merchant Ivory films. They've been showing them in places like Cine Lumiere, and then we've done a Q&A about Howard's End recently, and that was wonderful to see that again on the a really beautiful screen. But no, I don't watch them very often. No.
when you look back at your career, and maybe this is to help some young up and comers,
Mm.
what's the biggest mistake? Do you remember a time you just really screwed something up that you had to like, or have you always been pretty good about not screwing up? Like what have you had to fix in your work or career that's allowed you to overcome something?
Mm. No, that's a question I've never been asked. I'm sure I've screwed up more than once. And I've certainly, even when it wasn't my fault, gone and apologized to the director because I feel I'm the big boss, and that's my role in life is to apologize. Um, and I always say it's my fault immediately, and then they cannot have a comeback because the minute you say it's all my fault, you know, what can you do? You can fire me. I don't often, I think, because I'm very careful to make sure that everybody knows what we're doing. I don't spring surprises. And of course, so easy now with the internet and digital, whatever. So we photograph the fitting and immediately the photographs can go to the director. So he can see it or she can see it, and there should be no surprises on the day. and I can always check stuff. And I love having the director come and see what we're actually doing, see it for real with their own eyes in the fitting room if they want to, or not. It depends. Some just happy for me to get on with it. Some almost like to micromanage you, but on the whole, I just get on with it and do the best I can of the story, telling the story for the actor involved. So no, I probably don't screw up that often. I can't think.
That's probably why where you are in your
Well,
career.
hopefully, yes. I mean, I aim not to. Let's say that. And now, if this goes out and you say that, I'll get things back saying you don't remember when you absolutely ruined. I don't think I did. Um, no, I do try and make sure, absolutely, and I think this is really important for young designers. Don't make any secrets. Don't hold anything back. Absolutely show what you're up to because then it can be fixed early enough.
You've done such a variety of films and genres. Is there anything that you haven't done yet a time period, a genre that you're like, I would really love to dig into that a little bit more?
I don't think, I mean, I haven't done the Elizabethan period here, and I was in Elizabeth I. I haven't done, uh, um, I, I'm not terribly interested in sci-fi or whatever it's called. I mean, what we did with Furiosa is more the apocalypse, and it's a real world, even if it's 40 years ago. I said to George, when was this apocalypse? He said, 40 years ago, last Wednesday. So I know exactly when that happened. I mean, it's funny. I'm more interested in when I get a script and the story really appeals to me and I get a connection. I don't mind what period it is. I'm very happy to do the Jane Austen period again. I'm very happy to do anywhere. And I've just done a lovely film called The Coral, which will come out later this year. Alan Bennett script, very low budget, but wonderful. Set in 1916. I'd actually never done 1916, which is fascinating, mid First World War. Um, it's a brilliant story, heartbreaking and very funny, as only Alan Bennett can be. I mean, I think you'll love it. It directed by Nick Heitner, who used to be at the National Theatre. He's really a theatre person, but he always does Alan Bennett scripts. So it was joyous.
Another one that looked joyous was Cruella because that's so much different than, some of the other things, the black and the white and the pops of color. You get to really
Yeah.
play with that character. What do you
Yeah.
remember about working on that film?
Oh, I had a great time. I mean, dear me, it was lastminute.com. So I got this call from the producer and it was, what are you up to? And I thought, uh-oh. And I didn't know what she was doing. And I thought, Cruella, but Sandy Powell was always going to do it. Every time I did a Disney film, they were all always going to go on to Cruella. And it never happened. Anyway, what apparently happened was they had a last minute opportunity in Emma Stone's schedule. So it was like, let's do it. And Sandy, absolutely correctly, didn't think there was enough time. She was so right. But anyway, of course, I thought, oh, well. And my wonderful supervisor, Claire Spragg, thought, we can do it. And I thought, well, if Claire thinks we can do it, we can do it. And so we launched in, and then happily, Emma managed to slip and I think broke her collarbone, which she was mortified. And we were so thrilled. I mean, she was obviously in pain, but not ridiculous. And I said, you know, you don't know, you've just handed us a complete lifeline because it was an extra 6 weeks for her recovery. And it's very stunt laden for her. I mean, very active. So no way was she going to do it in any kind of plaster or sling or whatever. So we actually got a bit more time, but we basically did the whole thing. Originally, it was going to be 10 weeks, which is hardly enough time to think, let alone, find stuff, go over to LA to do fitting. Luckily, I mean, the fun enough, the 70s is the time I was interested in clothes. I started to make a bit of money. I was working very successfully in theatre and and there were really interesting shops like Bieber, and there was something called Bus Stop and Crocodile, and places in Kensington was quite sort of trendy, Kensington Market. And I did buy a few. bits and pieces. I couldn't afford much, but it was certainly a more interesting time. And I was never thin, but I was, sort of quite rangy and enjoyed wearing some of the clothing. And so I remembered it quite well. In fact, I can take my mind back. You forget stuff and then you actually can go back. It's like almost reading a book. And I can go back into where I was and what I was doing. And I can walk up and down Kensington High Street and how it was in those days and go into Kensington Market in my imagination. And, you know, um, so for me, I knew what it looked like. And the way the story is written, very instinctive. It was kind of clear how to do it. And the colors just, I always can see a film in color. I mean, it was just so obvious. It had to be black, white, and red. Plus, obviously, I mean, not exclusively, but they were strong. And I found a wonderful image of a woman called Nina Hagen, who was a German pop singer, very sort of, and I thought she's perfect to look, as a reference to the Cruella as she becomes, before she really goes into the fashion thing. And that was really helpful. I mean, there were all sorts of really interesting things that just, and the script was helpful. I mean, the trash dress is in the script. I didn't make that up out of the blue. In fact, the 3 photobomb opportunities are in the script. And the walking onto the car and the circling it so the Dutch Baroness can't see out and all that. It's in the script. It was just making it so it worked.
And Emma just seems fun.
Oh,
Is she?
she's gorgeous. Total fun. In fact, the two Emmas were just complete joy. I mean, the whole cast was fantastic. It was beautifully cast. Some really funny people. Um, Hilarious. I used to sort of almost embarrass myself laughing. But no, the both Emmas are absolutely fantastic to work with.
Your three Oscars are for A Room with a View, Mad Max Fury Road, and Cruella. I think that's a really cool, diverse trio. Where are
Yes.
those Oscars? Where do you keep them?
Okay, so in this house in which I'm sitting at the moment, it's quite a big house, Peckham, Victorian. At the back, there's a gorgeous room. We call it the Green Room because it was swirling William Morris Green when I bought the house. Um, and it's got a gorgeous window, sort of arched. And my mother's desk is in there, which is a nice sort of Victorian oak desk. And they're on there, um, the Oscars. Yes.
I love that. Well, Jenny Beavan, congratulations on the Career Achievement Award this year, and good luck
Thank
with
you.
Furiosa and everything else
Thank
that's
you.
happening. And it was so great to discuss your work at Gold Derby today.
Thank you very much. It's been great fun.